Are you ready to transform your summer into an epic splash-tastic adventure? Say goodbye to wasteful, single-use water balloons and hello to the ultimate in reusable, eco-friendly fun with reusable water balloons. Check out the link in the video description to get yours on Amazon today.
Dear Jane, my husband and I moved into a new house last month, leaving behind our apartment and city life in favor of a much more spacious home in the suburbs. To say it's been a culture shock would be a big understatement. But I vowed to myself that I would embrace the positives of suburban life and made a big effort to introduce myself to people in our neighborhood, specifically our neighbors on each side. There isn't really a huge sense of community when you're living in a high-rise apartment building, and that's something I was really excited about with our move. The couple on our right are so sweet, but very elderly. Speaking to them requires a very raised voice, if that makes sense. And I confess I was a bit concerned that my visions of backyard hangouts with our neighbors were going to evaporate when I met them. Thankfully, the couple on the left were just a few years older than us, very friendly, and seemed incredibly eager to welcome us into the neighborhood. On our first weekend in the new house, they hosted us for a barbecue and invited us over to spend July 4th with them, said we could use their pool whenever we wanted. It honestly felt like my sitcom-style dreams of neighborhood best friends had come true. But the night of that barbecue, we heard some horrifying screams coming from their backyard. I have never really understood the term blood-curdling, but this terrifying noise made me realize exactly what they're always going on about in the movies. I'm not joking when I say I ran out of the door and into our yard to peer over the fence and check that everything was okay, but there was nothing to be seen. The next day, I went round to make sure nothing was wrong, and when I mentioned the screams, they looked at me with completely blank stares, said they hadn't heard anything, and asked if it was maybe a nightmare. By that point I was so nervous and frazzled that I just shrugged it off. Days later, the screaming started again. Once again I ran outside, once again there was nothing there. 2 days after that, a bright light started shining in our bedroom window on and off. Almost like a police searchlight from a helicopter. When I looked out, it seemed to be coming from their backyard, but when I went outside it had once again disappeared. Again I went over to ask them if they'd seen anything, and again I got blank stares. Then the screams came back last night. I know I sound like a crazy person here, but I can't help but feel like they're playing some kind of twisted prank on us. There's no way that they're not hearing the same screams that we are. In fact, I'm surprised the whole neighborhood hasn't complained at this point. They seem so nice on the surface, so I feel ridiculous even blaming this on them, but this whole thing is really starting to freak me out. I've told my husband I want to call the police and have them check things out, but he is worried doing so might alienate us from the neighborhood entirely. Do you think I'm being insane, or do I have a legitimate cause for concern? From Mystery Mania. Dear Mystery Mania, this does rather sound like the beginning of either a horror movie or a psychological thriller. I can imagine how unsettling and upsetting this must be, but don't understand why your husband doesn't want you calling the police. At the very least, you must start recording this with your phone. Rather than blame the neighbors, think of this as a mystery that needs to be solved, and bring the neighbors in to help solve the conundrum. Unless you are hallucinating, it would seem that other neighbors must have heard something. Talk to them, explain you're becoming an amateur sleuth in order to get to the bottom of the mystery, rather than assigning blame on one family. I don't see how anyone in the neighborhood could blame you for calling the police, and, as said earlier, encourage you to gather evidence. Wishing you much luck and future peaceful evenings. Dear Jane, a couple of years ago I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and while I have accepted it and learned to live with it, my closest family however has cut off all contact with me since my diagnosis. Mental health is a taboo in my family, and it feels as though they are all deeply ashamed of me because of what I'm going through, and because I took steps to actually deal with my mental health rather than simply pretending like N.